E.T. the Extraterrestrial versus The Thing by Trent Elgar. Ours is indeed an age of extremity, for we live under continual threat of two equally fearful but seemingly opposed destinies, unremitting banality and inconceivable terror. In one case, fantasy beautifies the world. In the other, it neutralizes it. The year is 1982. It is the time of Reagan, inflation, the war on drugs, the AIDS epidemic, personal computing, a described post-Vietnam fatigued counterculturalism, and if you go to the movie theater, aliens. Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extraterrestrial and John Carpenter's The Thing were released 2 weeks apart, both produced by Universal Studios, and both about invasions from outer space, where the organism bonds with or inhabits human vessels. Everything else about the films, however, differ rather drastically, both in subject matter and reception. The PG-rated E.T., about kids finding an alien in Southern California, made $792.9 million, passing Star Wars as the highest-grossing film of all time. The Thing, about an alien finding scientists in Antarctica, only grossed $19.6 million, and was a critical and commercial failure. Retrospectively, these have become two of the most lauded and dissected sci-fi films ever, which begs the question of what was in the water, or what was the everyday American's geopolitical landscape in that summer of 1982. How does that shape what audiences were looking for out of the cinema-going experience? By isolating the moment in history, we can solve for their intentions, or the fears and hopes these films are working through contextually. We'll compare the titular lifeforms as organisms separate from their perceived connotation to examine aliens' role within the genre, and why we typically categorize them as symbols of good and evil, scary or not scary, as well as what do recurring anthropomorphic portrayals of the other mean about our separation of the self, mankind, and the cosmos. Where else to start but with the names of the movies? E.T. is personified. He is given a human name, and this is indicative of a sympathetic view of the other, such as Frankenstein, King Kong, or Casper the Friendly Ghost, compared to The Thing, which is so abstract and mutable and terrifying that describing it in any other terms would suggest a level of understanding, like Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and It Came from Beneath the Sea. A distance is put between the namesake organism and the viewer. Within the diegesis, the protagonists struggle to describe their foe past a noun and a setting, for example, the blank from the blank. Consciously or unconsciously, the titles of the movie, before even entering the auditorium, lures and predisposes the audience to feel sympathy or hostility towards the creature of the week. The taglines of the films emphasize this. E.T.'s is, he is afraid, he is totally alone, he is 3 million light years from home. Notice the pronouns. For whatever reason, it is decided that E.T. is a man. Men, or people in general, have homes, so the only difference between you and E.T. is he happens to be far from his planet. He also is granted emotion, fear, and loneliness, alluding to a tradition of community. Compared to The Thing's, man is the warmest place to hide, man being us, and it being the one hiding inside, this implies a parasitic relationship, that the organism utilizes humans as a host in order to survive. Nothing else is articulated about it, except that it jeopardizes our ability to stay warm and survive, which in movie terms distinguishes the other as a foreign enemy who must be destroyed, instead of an ally who we can learn from and eventually coexist with. Don't forget the trailers. The Thing, evoking atmosphere, gives as little information as possible. These sort of minimalist trailers don't exist in nature anymore. There is a voiceover reading, "Is anybody out there? Can anybody hear me? We found something." This vagueness is strategic in that the horror could be anything. It's interpretive. If, for example, you're shown a vampire on screen, one can say, well, that's not scary, so there's no point in me going to see that movie. The Thing offers no guarantees. Until you see it, The Thing is everything and nothing. It's Schrodinger's cat. You're left to fill in the blank of what your unique hell might be. E.T. is similar in the way that it holds back on shocking visuals, but immediately reveals through the voiceover that the film will be following a model of reassurance. It reads, "Witness the arrival, the search, the desertion, the fear, the discovery, the friendship, the secret, the love, the warning, the mystery, the danger, etc." These may sound like alternating genre buzzwords, but through these juxtapositions are walking the audience through the mastery machine. As spelled out in class, sublime, wonder, pleasure, learning, mastery, this roadmap tells the audience that in the end, everything will be alright, compared to The Thing, where these promises cannot be made. Who is more qualified to talk about the conception and intentions of these films than the directors themselves, who I happen to have here seated next to me? Let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Steven Spielberg and Mr. John Carpenter.
it just hit me out of the sky. I thought, what if the alien had stayed behind on Earth? What if he didn't? What if it was a kind of foreign exchange? Dreyfus goes away and the alien stays, and it suddenly this whole story hit me like a ton of bricks, and which was really a story about my mom and dad when they got divorced and how I felt as a kid, wanting a friend like that to fill the void.
Spielberg has described this movie as a minority story about how through communication, real-life adversaries can learn to overcome their differences, which this child/alien friendship is an analogy for. Whether this is mapped onto racial divisions domestically, recovering from the unfounded demonization of adversaries in Vietnam, this optimistic futurism posits a world where these differences are secondary to the common ground of being living, breathing members of the universe. Where problems big, being stranded on the wrong planet, and small, reeling from divorce, can find solace and solutions in unlikely places.
There was nothing like that, penis breath! Elliot!
What exactly is the Thing?
Well, the Thing is an alien organism that has been buried in the ice in Antarctica for 100,000 years. And what it does is imitate other life forms perfectly. So that, for instance, in the audience here, the problem might be that several of them, or all of them, could be the Thing.
Yeah.
What John Carpenter is doing in front of the David Letterman audience is framing the conflict of the movie onto the room they are seated in, where the monster is living among you, laughing alongside, without anyone's knowledge. But now that it's been brought up, heads start to turn, fingers start to point, fights start to break out on the car ride home. Carpenter has a quote about the finale of his film. "They just didn't know anything." I love that. Over the years, that movie has gotten its due because people were able to get past the horrificness of the monster, to see what the movie was about, which was paranoia. The only thing that's scarier than the monster is what we turn into trying to find it. How survival instincts clash with morals, and how all semblance of humanity can be lost while under siege. The Thing is deriving its themes of McCarthyism from its 1951 predecessor, The Thing from Another World. This threat of mutually assured destruction can be seen by Kurt Russell's vows to destroy the monster even at the expense of himself. How mankind becomes doomed is through the loss of connection and cooperation that makes us human, because without it, we're all just shivering assholes stuck in the cold, waiting for the fire to go out. Before we get too far, what even is sci-fi? Keith Johnston, in Genre, Theory, and Science Fiction, summarizes it as a combination of three ingredients: thematic areas around technology, science, futurism, or the future of the other; 2, iconographic elements such as flying saucers, robots, ray guns, and aliens; and, from an industrial perspective, focus on special effects or spectacle. So check, check, and check. Susan Sontag, in her piece The Imagination of Disaster, breaks down widescreen and technicolor science fiction narratives into 5 general steps. These tropes are foundational to genre in the same way that the Western repeats classic beats like the saloon brawl, the blonde school teacher from the East, and the gun duel on the deserted Main Street. Step 1. The arrival of the Thing. Emergence of the monster, landing of the alien spaceship, etc. Step 2. Confirmation of the hero's report by a host of witnesses to a great act of destruction. Step 3. In the capital of the country, conferences between scientists and the military take place, with the hero lecturing before a chart, map, or blackboard. Step 4. Further atrocities. At some point, the hero's girlfriend is in grave danger. Massive counterattacks by international forces with brilliant displays of rocketry, rays, and other advanced weapons are all unsuccessful. Step 5. More conferences whose motif is, they must be vulnerable to something. The final strategy, upon which all hopes depend, is drawn up. The ultimate weapon, often a super powerful as yet untested, nuclear device, is mounted. Success. Mutual congratulations while the hero and girlfriend embrace cheek to cheek and scan the skies sturdily. But have we seen the last of them? The Thing follows this recipe pretty darn closely, minus the international involvement and the girlfriend. All of these major beats are hit, especially due to the fact that Carpenter is doing a soft remake of the 50s The Thing from Another World. If we look at the final scene from that film, the researchers have mastered the enemy completely, but look cautiously to the skies afterward, prepared for the next attack. Whereas Carpenter's The Thing is intentionally ambiguous. Following the distrust of the 70s, or the crisis of confidence, civilians are questioning their preconceived notions more and more, hence the postmodern sensibility. For God's sake, this film was released on the exact same day as Blade Runner, June 25th, 1982, and both films end unsure if the villain has been defeated, and if our protagonist has been infected or has been one of them all along. In this world, there seem to be 2 classifications of aliens in film, friendly and not friendly. E.T. falls into the former, and with this subverts the latter half of the Sontag playbook. E.T., in the first act, steps 1 through 3, abides by the plotting expectations of any other monster movie. Shadowy cornfields, children running and screaming, government agents wearing sunglasses, and the disembodied creature conveyed off screen, or through its slimy, disparate body parts. But much like Close Encounters, this false setup is done in favor of revealing the other as a neutral party, just another species trying to survive. This inversion should make the audience look inward and question why they made the cognitive assumptions they did, as a result of their relationship with the world and the genre. Elliot, the audience avatar, being the one to find E.T. is significant. Spielberg, like J.D. Salinger, considers childhood a symbol of purity. No bias has yet been instilled into them, so they follow their heart. Spielberg echoes this sentiment in a French interview discussing working with the child actors and the spontaneity that comes from it.
I like taking kids who are fresh and who haven't had much exposure with the motion picture industry and the discipline of making film, and essentially get the spontaneity from them on take two. They're not old enough to censor themselves. They're not old enough to say, I really shouldn't do that because. And once you begin saying, I really shouldn't do that because, you're imposing logic over instinct. And children give you instinct.
This embrace of instinct over logic is the same conclusion one is meant to draw over the course of the film, persevering through fear and finding friendship. Approaching the alien life forms from a biological perspective, we can compare how the creatures are personified, either as a means of empathy or exercising fears of identity theft, or having one's body snatched, literally or figuratively. Sobchak quotes in their work Images of Wonder, one of the weaknesses of science fiction is that it too often fails to break away from the anthropomorphic view of the cosmos. There are 100 billion stars in our galaxy, and 100 billion galaxies in the visible universe, and one of the stock themes of science fiction is that of alien civilizations, but it is difficult to imagine these different worlds without falling back on human standards and thus making them ridiculous. E.T. talks, he eats, he drinks, he gets sick, he has a range of emotions, he has complex motor and rotor skills. For what it's worth, he quickly learns to be a functioning member of society who just happens to be short and telepathic. In the text it is said that E.T. has DNA. He doesn't have 4 nucleotides like we do, he has 6, and he has organs and a body plan evolutionarily comparable to Homo sapiens. The detail about DNA even insinuates that we both are composed of the same building blocks, or to be romantic about it, all made of stardust. Unlike the Thing, his anatomy is fixed. You can metaphorically wrap your hands and brain around E.T. after the initial shock. The inside of E.T.'s ship is shown in the opening. It depicts a forested environment filled with familiar-looking palm trees and steamy space mushrooms. You also see his family members waddling around, and their hearts glow red, operating as a means of communication. This sort of background exposition is rarely focused on in science fiction, but it operates to establish a civilized home for E.T. to return to. The Thing, however, is harder to put our collective finger on. It has no definite form. It has no gender. It is an it. It infects carriers, humans and dogs, as a means of reproduction, and erupts from their vehicles, killing them in the process. It's worth noting that the Thing doesn't eat its prey in the traditional monster manner. It simply multiplies through it, with no discernible thought or expression. The scary thing about the Thing is the ease at which it replicates and imitates humans. Not only is this exercising standard fears of death, but of being replaced. Think Invasion of the Body Snatchers. John Carpenter states, "It's better to be a human being than an imitation, or let ourselves be taken over by this creature who's not necessarily evil, but whose nature it is to simply imitate, like a chameleon." Much like H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds, the alien in The Thing is another example of H.P. Lovecraft's cosmic horror. The notion that ancient inhuman beings exist that do not care about humanity in any way. The creature is a being beyond our understanding, and possesses the ability to destroy all life on Earth quickly. Just as Lovecraft left his creatures undescribed, the Thing can be seen, but its shape is mostly indescribable, beyond the realm of human knowledge. This fear of being overtaken, transcended, or rendered extinct by the other is a recurring theme that is mapped onto cultural fears, international or domestic, at the time of release. Connecting to these films, however, is not exclusive to American citizens in 1982. Movies adapt and change their meaning over time, and themes of friendship and paranoia are eternal and far-reaching. The spaceships of both creatures are notably similar in design, but you never see the inside of the Thing's vessel, or any version of its habitat, nor do you see individuals interacting with one another. The Thing, even though it has multiple independently functioning limbs, it is a single entity. Carpenter seems to understand that in nature, the concept of good and evil dissolves when all parties involved want the same thing, to ensure the survival of themselves and their species. At the end of the film, the researchers, led by Kurt Russell, opt to blow up the base, sacrificing themselves in order to prevent the thing from making landfall and jeopardizing humanity or freezing itself in the ice, preserving itself indefinitely. The thing is us against them, while E.T. is us and them. I'm not suggesting that Kurt Russell should have tried to have a diplomatic discussion with the thing, but it's undeniable that the context, connotation, and creature effects shape the relationship the characters and audience have with any movie monster, most of whom have the shared long-term agenda as humans, to outlast its surroundings by any means necessary. To quote my high school science teacher, feeding and breeding is at the center of all living things.
All looked away and people were gasping. That's a favorable response as far as you're concerned?
Honestly, in this kind of film, you're dealing with something that the whole audience knows isn't real at all. You know that there's no such thing as a monster from outer space. At least we haven't seen one in the paper. And I want the audience to believe it.
Yeah.
When they see that, say, oh, my Lord, look at that. That's real.
Carpenter and Spielberg are put in a unique position, acknowledging the artificiality of the medium and still attempting to elicit genuine emotional responses, as is the blessing and curse of working in science fiction. The universal understanding that the setting is constructed emphasizes the role of the cinema as a safe space to rehearse and tame fears, and a playground to beautify the mundane. The first shots of these films are nearly identical, the alien ship arriving on Earth, but the closing shots showed the two polar opposite outcomes of these close encounters. The last shot of E.T. is of Elliot's bittersweet face looking up at the sky, and the last shot of the thing is the flames over the camp, assuming that all remaining survivors would be dead by morning. E.T. equates humans and the other, while the thing pits them against each other. Where E.T. is looking forward to an optimistic future, the thing acknowledges and is terrified of the present. The competing forces of the self, mankind, and beyond, and their portrayal within science fiction films are highly reflective of the social periphery, and these two now legendary films being released in the same month in 1982 creates a dichotomous time capsule.